Why are eccentrics so important? What's this about then, Mike?
Well, there's several reasons. The most important reason is it is the sort of the invisible forces that surround us in day-to-day life. When eccentrics come into play, the body automatically reacts to eccentrics. So you are constantly exposed to eccentric forces, and you have a system in your body that is set up to encounter these forces and harness them. It's shocking how difficult it is to raise your 1 rep maximum and how easy it is to lower it. The key thing is this: when you go above super maximal, there is what I call a therapeutic window. So I mentioned that just doing your maximum weight is sort of the minimum effective dose.
Welcome to another episode brought to you by Imagine Strength, the future of safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Are you a HIIT studio owner looking for equipment that's not just top-notch, but also tailored to your specific needs? Imagine Strength is your answer. Inspired by the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength is revolutionizing the HIIT industry with their state-of-the-art yet affordable equipment. Their team doesn't just sell HIIT equipment, they live and breathe it. I've personally experienced their gear at the Resistance Exercise Conference, and let me tell you, it was an intense workout that I won't soon forget, in the best way possible, of course. So why choose Imagine Strength? Number one, they provide customized solutions for HIIT studios. Number two, they have budget-friendly yet high-performance designs. And number three, they're committed to innovation and excellence in high-intensity training specifically. Founder Jeff Turner and his dedicated team are on a mission to make HIIT accessible to everyone. Getting started is easy. Number one, visit imaginestrength.com. Number two, consult with their expert team. And number three, choose the equipment that will skyrocket your business. Don't wait. Head over to imaginestrength.com and elevate your HIIT studio today with Imagine Strength. Lauren Snell here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for elevating your HIIT business and fueling your passion for high-intensity training. This is episode 444, and today's guest is Dr. Michael MacMillan. Dr. Michael MacMillan is a retired orthopedic surgeon and former associate professor from the University of Florida, now resides in St. Petersburg, Florida. He was born in New York City and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina. He has a notable background in athletics, having set a North Carolina state record in powerlifting. Dr. MacMillan, an alumnus of North Carolina State University and the University of North Carolina School of Medicine, has a deep interest in musculoskeletal biomechanics. He's renowned for his work in spinal surgery and research, particularly focusing on the medical applications of resistance exercise, with a special emphasis on eccentric muscle force during his tenure with MEDEX at the Center for Exercise Science. Mike, welcome to the show. Great to be with you.
Lawrence, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
You are very welcome. I'm excited. So where do we start? I mean, I had a note here. My initial question is, why are eccentrics so important? What's this about then, Mike?
Well, there's several reasons. The most important reason is it is the sort of the invisible forces that surround us in day-to-day life. Most people don't realize that they're sort of the unconscious forces. When you pick up a glass, you use your concentric strength to pick it up, and you initiate the reaction. But when eccentrics come into play, the body automatically reacts to eccentrics. So, it's little known that when you just walk forward and put your foot down on the ground, that you're actually hitting the ground with 1.5 times body weight. You jump off a wall, it can be up to 4 times body weight. So you are constantly exposed to eccentric forces, and you have a system in your body that is set up to encounter these forces and harness them.
Can we just to really keep it, I guess, start with a simple idea and just define it for everyone, as much as myself as everyone else, just define exactly what eccentrics are?
So it's a very currently misunderstood term. So the magic of eccentrics, if you look at the force velocity curve on a muscle, and when you exert that force against a light weight, you have a very high velocity, and a low weight, and then a mid-range weight. You have sort of a mid-range velocity, and a heavier weight. And then when you get up towards the heavy weights, the 95% of your max, the velocity slows down. But at that point where the weight exceeds the force capacity of the muscle, everything changes. The major thing that's obvious is that the muscle goes from shortening to lengthening. From a physics standpoint, when you're doing concentric work, you're putting energy in the environment, you're moving the weight. But at the point where the weight exceeds your force, the external force goes into the body. It's actually a negative velocity because the muscle is lengthening. So the body has accounted for this, and they accounted for this through an entirely different system of molecules that get engaged. I kind of liken it to the shoulder harness on a seatbelt, where you if you move slowly, you can pull your seatbelt harness on, but if you move rapidly, it engages and stops it. And this system keeps our muscles from being pulled apart when they encounter high levels of force. We often talk about actin and myosin when we talk about muscles, and people are always sliding their fingers back and forth, how the sarcomere works. The missing part that really is the eccentric thing, it almost works like a Chinese finger trap. These two large molecules that are part of this system, called nebulin and titin, are the largest molecules in the body. They have elastic properties. And if you can imagine a Chinese finger trap on your fingers, when you're sliding in and out, it goes without any resistance. But if you pull suddenly, it traps it, and you're suddenly pulling against the Chinese finger trap. And those are the molecules that engage, the titin and the nebulin molecules that catch that.
And this was the same Chinese finger trap that was made famous by the Addams Family movies, I believe.
I missed that reference, so I'll take it.
I was like, what is that? And then I Googled it and I thought, oh yeah, Addams Family. So hopefully the audience are with me on that one. But how do you get out of a Chinese finger trap then?
Well, in this case, there is one connection that's made between the molecules. The thing that is also missed, it's a little deep in the weeds, is that these molecules are actually helical, like the helical DNA molecules, and they wrap around each other. So when the molecules shorten, they don't just slide past each other, they actually intertwine each other. And then, so it just requires one short connection when the stretch is initiated. So the way to get out of the finger trap is to relax the stretch. As long as there's a stretch like against the muscle, it's going to resist that. And it's not going to resist it with actin and myosin. It's going to resist it with the molecular properties of these two large molecules, which are much stronger than actin and myosin.
Interesting. Okay. So where do we go from here? I guess the thing that keeps coming up for me is, so when I guess my basic understanding of this is when I'm strength training, eccentric to me is, I always think of the lowering of the weight, right? You're lengthening the muscle as you put it there. So if I'm going to do a set of chest press and I'm pushing out, and as I come back on myself, that's the eccentric stroke or phase of the repetition. And I understand that that's valuable in terms of providing a fatiguing stimulus to the muscle and the bone, and just similar to the concentric, but it also produces a lot more muscle damage, is my understanding as well, which is why one has to be mindful of how much load and how much overall concentric volume you might do. So my immediate question for you, maybe I'm getting too far in this conversation, Mike.
No,
stop me if I am.
These are all good points.
Well, this is just my very basic understanding. Is what are we missing? I feel like we're getting a good eccentric stimulus in whatever modality of exercise we decide to use, whether that's, body weight, calisthenics, or free weights, or machines. So long as we're using the eccentric phase in our training, we're not just doing concentric, and we're still getting to a deeper level of fatigue. What are we missing with that approach? Maybe we'll just go. I don't know whether that's one for 30 minutes time or whether that was a good place to start now.
Well, I'm going to step on a lot of toes here because again, that supramaximal state where the force exceeds the force capacity of the muscle. So when you're doing a true eccentric lengthening, you are trying not to lower the weight. So in other words, you're maximally stimulated, and the weight is forcing the muscle to lengthen. And that's that Chinese finger trap that engages and actually elastically it moves elastically to lengthen. So if you are just lowering a submaximal weight, that's more of a neuromuscular skill that you're doing. You're actively lengthening one muscle against the antagonistic muscle on the other side. So you don't get the benefits of true eccentrics if you're just lowering a submaximal weight. So you have to be in that supramaximal zone to get the physiologic benefits of eccentrics.
So what would maybe your product achieves this and answers this question, but what does it have to look like then, in your opinion, in terms of delivering an optimal eccentric stimulus? What has to happen? Maybe if we could use, I don't know, an exercise as an example, like a chest press or a leg press or what have you.
Okay. So again, I've mentioned that the effective eccentric stimulus should be supermaximal. So
I define supermaximal for me.
Supermaximal is it's anything. So if 200 pounds is my maximal chest press, that would be a great starting point for eccentric training, because at your maximal weight, it is a true overload.
What 1 RM basically.
1 RM.
Yeah.
If you lower your 1 RM, you're going to push as hard as you can. And when you lower that down, you're going to be engaging a amount of force that goes through the sarcomere that exceeds what the muscle can generate itself. So you're giving it a force that exceeds what it normally can accommodate. There's a couple of very important things about that. One thing is that doesn't require any energy. It's shocking how difficult it is to raise your 1 rep maximum and how easy it is to lower it.
Why doesn't it require any energy? So you're talking about glucose being metabolized, glycogen,
Exactly.
as you do the concentric. What happens in the eccentric in terms of there not being any energy utilized?
It's purely based on these molecules just stretching. So again, remember that when the load exceeds what you can push, the energy is flowing into the body. In other words, you're absorbing energy from the environment when you're lowering this heavy weight, and it's absorbed in the elastic properties of titin and nebulin being stretched.
Right.
And that doesn't require the energy systems that you use in actin and myosin. So it's very low energy usage, which is valuable.
So these titin and nebulin
and titin.
They are molecules. They're not filaments. Is that correct?
They're part of the philia. They are
part of it.
The way it works is the sarcomere is part of the myofilament.
Okay.
And so the actin molecule rests on top of the nebulin molecule, and the myosin molecule rests on top of the titin. So they're actually, going back and forth all the time, being shortened by actin and myosin. Very energy dependent. a lot of effort into that.
Mhm.
But in that situation, when there's a sudden stretch, the body really, really has a lot of protective reflexes. That stretch reflex when you go see the doctor and he taps your knee, your knee jumps out. That's the reason that exists is for eccentrics, because if you suddenly stretch, like when your patellar ligament is stretched by that tap, the muscle tries to shorten, and that's to engage the eccentrics to protect it. And that's how your leg doesn't collapse when you step off a step. The lengthening that happens there, these molecules engage, lock, and you absorb that extra force with these large molecules.
So maybe I'm jumping ahead again here, but I'm trying to understand well, maybe we can first talk about the ideal protocol, because that's kind of what we were discussing.
Sure.
And then from there, I'd love to learn about the different adaptations. So, for instance, the adaptations that your protocol, your kind of equipment augmentation might deliver versus a traditional eccentric rep taken to failure, for example. So, but before we get there, tell me a little bit more about what is because you were kind of talking about it there. What is the actual protocol, the ideal protocol look like? Like how are you delivering these eccentrics that you perceive to be more valuable?
So it kind of reminds me of like a Buddhist saying, is that how do you lower the weight you cannot lift?
This is what I was thinking, actually. That's why it's so confusing.
So that actually, I gave you some information that I had actually back in the 70s worked with a friend of mine who owned a Nautilus gym, and we sort of heard about the Colorado experiment, and
Right.
so we had this the double chest machine and the old Nautilus pull down machines. And we said, we're going to try these negative things. This is back like in 75 or around that time. So there we did it by standing behind the weight stack. And my friend Harris Turley would, pull it together, and I would push down on the weight stack after he did the repetition to give him added weight. Well, we did that for like maybe one workout, and that wasn't enough. So then we started having to carry a trash can around, put it behind the weight stack, stand up on the trash can. And when the weight stack went up, we'd put our foot on it. And that only worked for a while and then after a while, this is a 6-week program we did. At the end of it, we were standing on the weight stack and pushing up on the frame because of the high amount of eccentric force required. So again, you want to lower a weight that you can't lift to get the full benefit of eccentrics.
I see. So is that the crux of this then? It's like like you say, you either need a help from assistance to help raise a heavy weight that you can't lift, but you can lower, or you need some kind of device that's going to complement the machine, or a brand new machine that's going to achieve that.
Yeah. So there are a variety of ways in order to get a weight that you can't lift. And the thing that occurred to me, what started this whole process for me, and I actually came up with the idea in the late 80s, was if you wanted to raise 200 pounds and you wanted to lower 250 pounds, you don't want a machine to have to manipulate 200 pounds, and you don't want a machine to have to manipulate 250 pounds. You just need the difference between the two. So it became clear that the way to achieve eccentrics, the most energy efficient way, was to just give somebody 50 pounds or whatever weight they desired, assistance in raising the weight, and then remove assistance. So if you had 250 pounds on the weight stack, I could just give you 50 pounds of assistance. I wouldn't have to jump on a trash can and jump and push on the weight stack down. We could just give you 50 pounds of assistance. And then when you get to the top, release that assistance, and then you have to lower the full 250. So So the assistance method is really the one that really resonated with me and based on the products that I developed.
And there are certainly some brands out there currently which do increase the negative load. So what's wrong with what you see out there currently?
Well, as I mentioned, I had the basics of strength training drilled into me under the tutelage of Arthur Jones when I was working with him on the back machine. And so the key thing is this: when you go above super maximal, there is a what I call a therapeutic window. So I mentioned that just doing your maximum weight is sort of the minimum effective dose. Obviously, this is framed in a medical format, and I can't
It's
help
okay.
myself.
That's fine. I think we're all familiar with that, having all read Doug McGuff's work.
Yes, yeah, no, exactly. And so but that's the minimum effective dose. Now, the problem is as you increase the amount of weight that you expose the user to, there is an unknown threshold where you start disrupting the molecules when you exceed their force. So in terms of the best way to supply eccentrics, you have to carefully control. And this is something that I really, as I said, I'll die on this hill that you can't just willy nilly take civilians off the street and expose them to unknown levels of eccentric force. So the way to imagine this is if I had a motorized platform coming at me, and I'm in a leg press, say, and I'm pushing against that motorized platform, there's three things that you have to track. You have to track the speed that the resistance is coming, and the amount of tension in the muscle, and the amount of weight that's on the that being forced against you. So if I'm pushing against a motorized platform, the speed is fixed, so that doesn't change at all. I push against it, no matter how hard I push, the velocity stays the same, and the amount of resistance is essentially infinite. No matter how hard you push, the platform's going to keep coming. So the variable in that is the tension in the muscle. So if you push as hard as you can, it's kind of like a pressure, the needle on a steam engine going up higher. The tension in the muscle goes higher and higher as you try to resist it.
Mhm.
Now, if you substitute that platform for a weight, imagine a weight hanging on a rope, say those 300 pounds, and you push against that. If your maximum force is 300 is 320 pounds, then as the weight goes towards you and you start pushing with 250 pounds of force and 260, the weight simply slows down. The velocity of the weight changes.
Right.
And then if you were to exceed that force, in other words, if your max is 320 and the weight weighs 300, if you exceed that, then the weight simply changes direction. So having a isotonic or isoinertial weight, basically weights, if you do momentarily exceed the force that's being exerted against you, it's the weight that sort of buffers that, slows down, or changes direction. So I draw a very hard line that eccentrics need to be done with weight stack or even free weight resistance as that can respond to the force that your muscles are generating, so it doesn't create high levels of strain inside the muscle.
Right. So, okay. So you're saying that a constant speed, which some technologies have on the eccentric, is producing too much strain, and
And
that's a bad thing. Is that
yeah,
right? Why is
yeah,
that?
be, because of that therapeutic window I talked about. So there's a zone, and this goes back to what I learned in orthopedics about materials. You know,
Right.
when you strain the material, when you bend a bone or pull a tendon or pull a ligament, there's three phases. There's it's called a flexible phase or elastic phase, where when you strain a muscle that's resisting you, there's a certain phase in there where it just again stretches it. But when you get above certain levels, you actually deform the tissues. You start disrupting the molecular interactions, and you cause like a permanent bend in it. It's like, coat hanger. You can bend a coat hanger, but if you bend it too far, it'll go bent.
I'll stay
And then,
bent. Right.
and then if you bend it too much, it will break. So
Right.
the importance of the weights are incremental resistance. You can also do progressive resistance exercise on the eccentric side. And that's probably the punchline. You want to do progressive resistance exercise eccentrically as well as concentrically.
Okay. Is
And
that
that,
like, is there, sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
I say, and that way you can dose it and you can do all the basic principles of exercise, but apply it to the eccentric weight as well.
Today's episode is sponsored by Imagine Strength, the game changer in safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training machines. When it comes to HIIT, Imagine Strength is your go-to for intelligently designed, efficient, and affordable equipment. Their team is passionate about HIIT, and it shows in every piece they craft. So why are Imagine Strength the right choice? Number one, they tailor-make their equipment for HIIT studios. Number two, they provide cost-effective solutions for your business. And number three, they are committed to ongoing innovation and refinement. Ready to take your HIIT business to the next level? Visit imaginestrength.com to discuss your needs and find the perfect gear for your studio. Join the HIIT revolution of Imagine Strength and transform your workout experience today. Let's go. Okay, I think I understand that. So is there like any good research, I doubt it, to compare, I don't know, the high, in quotations, kind of level of strain from a constant load through someone, I guess, giving their maximum, which you are kind of suggesting is a problem, or could produce like a chronic, negative effect, versus the protocol you describe. Is there any research out there currently that's looked into this at all? Because I'm not aware of it.
So there are myriad articles on eccentric exercise. The problem is that there's not a standard way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, when I decided that eccentrics were important, and I consider them very important, that when I looked at what was available, there was really no eccentric technology available. A lot of people have tried and failed at creating eccentric equipment for various reasons. So rather than shift into researching the effective eccentrics, I realized at first I had to at least have equipment that could be standardized and used. So
right, for research, right?
Yeah, for research. So I'll just build my own machine. How hard could that be?
Hard, I suspect.
Tricky. A little tricky.
Yeah. And what is this? So you had a machine or a device at Rec we were talking about just now. A Rec 2020, was it, in Vegas? Was
Yes.
2020? I might be getting that date wrong. Yeah. Could you describe what you did there?
Okay. Well, I'll briefly say that I did have a mechanical version in the 90s, which involved a counterbalance weight stack. So we could assist the machine, assist the weight stack, raising it up, and you could set it. And I actually was able to open a fully eccentric gym back in 2002 with these machines. The problem is that basically the cost of the machine, that would never be um, available for widespread commercial use because of the price of producing them. And that's
How
a
much do they cost?
uh, well, we initially, those machines were in excess of $10,000 for the additional piece that you put on the machine.
I see.
So that would never reach full scale commercial production. So I sold that technology off, and and really, kind of thought that it would never reach mainstream. Fortunately, in the 2010s, a lot of new technology. So our friend I worked with on this made me aware of a new generation of what's called torque motors. They have now, because of the advances in robotics and programming, and they now have motors that you can say, when this happens, I want you to pull 10 pounds, and it would pull exactly 10 pounds, or I want you to pull 20 pounds or 50 pounds. So when I heard that, I said, that's exactly what we need. If we could program the motor to give that assistance just when the user needs it, and then the motor to relax the assistance. So beginning around 2010, 2011, 2013, in that area, we began looking at these torque motors and how they could be programmed to work with the user in order to give exactly the right amount of assistance that the user needs at the precise time.
On the eccentric primarily, is that correct?
Well, actually, the way it works out, we set, if you were to use one of these machines, and again, we can adapt to Imagine Strength machines or Medix machines.
Got it.
We would connect the cable to the weight stack, and if you do the curl, say you have 140 pounds on the weight stack, and we could give you 50 pounds of help. And even though the weight stack says 140 pounds on it, the cable will be helping you with 50 pounds of help. So you're only raising 90 pounds up. And then again, this cable is attached to a very smart computerized motor that tracks your position, your direction, your speed, and knows the amount of force that you want. And when you reach the top and reverse direction, it then takes away the 50 pounds of help, and you hold the 140 and hold that down. You can't lift 140, but you can easily lower it.
Okay. And then what's happening in that eccentric stroke? What's this torque motor doing then, or is it doing very little at that point?
It's just following the weight stack then. So it basically turns off. We keep about 3 to 5 pounds of tension to keep the cord, keep the cable in place. And then we can also use the cable's tracking you go down. So when you reach the bottom, it knows you reached the bottom, and then it engages the 50 pounds of help again. And so you can raise the weight back up.
Okay. Without mentioning any brands, because I don't want to say bad things about other brands and machines, although people can probably extrapolate what I'm saying. There are machines out there that will increase the negative load on the way back. And obviously there is the positive stroke is therefore doesn't require any assistance. Like the individual could do the positive stroke themselves, and then they do the negative stroke, which is then the load is increased by whatever 40%, 60%. I still don't quite understand the difference between that type of approach, the machines that do that, versus your own. What the difference is there?
Well, the only other system out there that does successful incremental eccentrics would be the X-Force machines.
Right. That's actually what I was describing, but trying not to say the brand, but never mind.
And so that's what I would call a mechanical solution. They tilt the weight stack forward. I think it's about 45 degrees. I could be off on that.
So, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you do the sine of that, that's 0.707. So that's about 30% in the range of 30% off. So um, when the weight stack's tilted, it's 30% less. And then when the weight stack goes up, it's the full amount, and you lower that back down.
Hmm.
And that's an effective way. I agree with their principles. I agree with that. Um, the the advantage with the motorized assistance is that there are a lot of possibilities for um, um, what the machine can do despite just one force level. So, um, so when so you are going to always have that fixed relationship of 30% help on your machine, and frankly, it's a it's another system that um, is very expensive to build, and
Hmm.
um, and would be difficult to um, expand it widespread because of the cost inhibitions.
I see. I see. Understood. Okay. So just I guess one of the things I want to kind of go back to, we started sort of talking about is you were describing the adaptations that like a heavier eccentric load delivers, which you think are superior. So for instance, just to paint a visual, if I'm doing a chest press exercise and I go to concentric muscle failure and I'm doing both the positive and the negative strokes of repetition, if I'm training a load that's going to get me to failure at 8 reps, I've done 8 reps of negative load in that. So a fair amount of eccentric work, but it's the loads stayed the same. The load hasn't changed.
Right.
Now I'm going to get obviously many positive strength and health adaptations as a result of that. What's the difference in the adaptations that you believe are delivered through the much heavier negative, right? Which is effectively what we're talking about.
So this goes back to my orthopedic training. So
Mhm.
I trained under a renowned, scientifically based orthopedic surgeon. I give him credit, Dr. William F. Enneking. Any orthopedic surgeon in my age group will know who William Enneking was. Quite the sort of the orthopedic version of Arthur Jones. So
Oh,
he
wow.
he he made our residency a year longer, and we did nothing but basic science for a year during my orthopedic training. One of the and we studied pathology and physiology, but we also studied biomechanics. And again, this goes back to the relationship between when you overload a musculoskeletal tissue, bone, ligament, and tendon. And we've all heard what happens with that. It's called Wolff's Law. I'm sure you're familiar with that terminology.
Only after reading
Yeah.
the documents you sent me, but go on, Mike.
So it became clear that particularly when bones were bent under loads, that there was a structural adaptation. And what that means is that in that overload causing uh, either elastic bending of the bone or even um, plastic bending, where it actually deforms the tissue, it responds by structurally increasing it. It is the key to hypertrophy. Now, I'm sure we could have a whole lection on hypertrophy. Um, I do not believe that there are any molecular um, agents, such certainly not lactic acid. I don't think many people believe that anymore. That cause hypertrophy. There's a lot of things that lend to it, but the stimulus to create that cellular reaction is deformation of the bones. And it's actually um, a slight electrical charge that goes into the cellular membrane. You're not going to get that unless you structurally deform it. So you discussed doing, when you do multiple sets and you're doing the eccentric, it maybe feels harder when you're doing um, regular weights, but the difference is that you're not doing this structural changes in the tissue itself. And it's been documented in bones, ligaments, and tendons. Like my epiphany was I was, looking at the biomaterial things, looking, so when bone flexes, you affect the homeostasis of it, now called proteostasis, where, bone is always being built and remodeled. You're continually building and replacing your bone. And this structural stimulus causes you to go way on the side of building the bone rather than just replacing it as well. So that's a effect of homeostasis. Now, when you actually bend the bone, then you get that's the structural adaptation, and I think that's we talk about strength and the ability to do work, and that's very important on the concentric side. But we also do these exercises predominantly to make people more resilient, to eliminate, and this is my long-term goal, is to introduce this into the elderly population, which I now am a member of. And
You wouldn't know.
yeah, thank you. And this structural remodeling is very important to prevent osteoporosis, obviously, sarcopenia, improves force production.
Yeah.
So the structural adaptation occurs on the eccentric side, and the physiologic adaptation occurs on the concentric side.
So I hope you don't mind me challenging you, Mike. I'm just really trying to wrap my head around this.
Good.
So for instance, okay, the thing is though, we know that traditional strength training done in the way that I've tried to poorly describe it on this podcast will improve bone mineral density, will prevent or reduce the risk of osteopenia and osteoarthritis, right? So we do know that is productive. Are you saying it's suboptimal? It's not, we could be having producing more profound adaptations on the bone, specifically through using this approach that you're advocating on this podcast.
So there are a lot of overload forces, even in the concentric or submaximal range, because our muscles, are levers and fulcrums, and the amount of muscle force that's generated, even submaximally, is enough to cause these flexing of the bones and to promote homeostasis. In other words, if you lift regular weights, you're going to work in that range where you are going to prevent bone loss. And if you are osteoporotic and you're below normal, it can bring you back to your normal status. But if you can isolate that stimulus where you are working in the supramaximal range, it is a much more effective stimulus, a much more robust way to send that signal with less frequent training and with a better result.
Right. Okay. Okay. So you just think it's more potent. I guess we don't yet have the research to really show this explicitly. Is that correct?
We know from physiologic testing that there is a much higher response to eccentrics in structural adaptation than concentrics.
Okay.
There's papers showing that the ribosomes that create the proteins that reinforce the muscles and the bones go up 400% more when exposed to this overload. It's almost like an alarm goes off when you're exposed to an overload that, this is something we've never seen before. We need to ramp up our response to this and make sure that the body's capable of handling this.
It's just interesting because I'm thinking of my workouts and I'm thinking when I'm, at muscle failure and I'm at that last rep and I'm doing that eccentric and that eccentric is tough. I mean, I am fighting it all the way down. It's brutal. Um, it feels very productive, right? I feel like I'm going to get that eccentric benefit. Like kind of what I'm hearing when I'm listening to you, Mike, is look, these eccentrics that you're doing, that I'm doing, that many of my listeners do are still very productive. But your opinion is that, by having how's it you put it, like a much higher load, a maximal load, they're just going to be, the adaptation is going to be slightly better, or maybe in your view, significantly
So,
better. Yeah.
so again, um, from when you look at it as the mechanical load, so that is what this is focused on. It's mechanotransduction. It's
Mhm.
it's that signal that's in the tissue itself. So even though you're struggling lowering the weight down, a lot of that is basically muscular fatigue. But the the structure of the muscle is, the structure of the bones and the tendons and the ligaments all around that. Um, they're they are not experiencing any um, super physiologic stimulus that's going to cause them to um, work on structural adaptation in order to turn that muscle around. It's when you're working below your max, it's there's very little strain into the structural elements of the muscle. Again, this titin and nebulin, the
Right.
attachment to the cell wall, and also to the musculoskeletal elements.
So, okay, I kind of hear what you're saying. So it comes back to what you're saying about that therapeutic window, which if we can get a solution that's within that window, you're going to get kind of maximal benefit in terms of bone, ligament, tendon strength, etc. But in some cases, as you alluded to during this podcast, if it's too high, it could actually be a negative, right? If you're outside that therapeutic window,
Yes,
it
yes.
it could cause some kind of deformation that we don't want,
And
right?
that's where you start talking about muscular soreness and injury. And
I see.
so very important that, again, that the principles of progressive resistance exercise um, are used to properly load the patient. The,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
You're fine.
the, I will say something about hypertrophy. So you uh, you get a lot of physiologic stress from doing normal concentric workouts, but there is a requirement. It's called, so these things that cause the muscle to contract are the myofibrils. They're the packages inside the muscle, and just stimulating muscle protein um, will allow you to build up your genetically endowed amount of protein that you have. And again, if you're relatively um, um, uh, uh, what's the term Arthur Jones used to use? Disuse atrophy. If you're not accustomed to weights and again, you're under constant remodeling your body. If you don't use your muscles, they go away. So it's very effective at bringing you up to genetic potential. Now, if
Got it.
you want to go into hypertrophy, and this is again a little maybe made for athletes that want to improve athletic performance, they want to increase their muscular force. Making the protein isn't enough. It has to be functional myofibrils. Functional myofibrils mean that they have to integrate into the muscle. So basically, all the chairs are taken in the auditorium when you have your full genetic potential. If you're going to put more people in that auditorium, you need more chairs. And so this is what occurs. This is when you start getting into the strain of the muscle, and all these myofibrils attach at a uh, entity called the Z line, which is actually a disc. They call it the Z disc. And this goes back to Comey's research in the 80s, where there is separation of the myofibrils of the Z disc, And these allow the muscles to integrate into the muscle fiber itself. So if you can only get these separations if you do overload training, and that enables hypertrophy to occur at that point because you have to integrate the protein into the muscle fiber.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike. So I think we're probably going to have to do a part 2 because we're at we've got to wrap up at this point. But I really appreciate you coming on and being a good sport to all of my challenges today. I know it's flown by. They always do. I can see it on your face.
Yeah.
But we'll certainly line up part 2 if you're open to that. Mike, what's the best way for listeners to learn more about you and check out what you're up to?
Well, I'm not a big social media maven, but I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. In terms of anyone wants to contact me, they can. The product name we've been using is called Negator, Negator.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah. Negator Strength at gmail.com.
Great stuff. Thank you. And again, thanks for coming on. This has been a great learning experience, and I'm looking forward to exploring more with you. For everyone listening, to get the show notes for this episode, please go to the usual place, highintensitybusiness.com, and search episode 444. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. This episode is brought to you by Imagine Strength, your go-to for safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Growing a successful high-intensity training business requires workout equipment that's not only high quality, but also intelligently designed to fit the unique needs of your studio. And that's where Imagine Strength comes in. Drawing on the wisdom of the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength has crafted a groundbreaking line of fitness equipment that's as affordable as it is efficient, giving your studio the upgrade it needs without breaking the bank. The team at Imagine Strength breathes HIIT. Their passion for high-intensity training shines through in their designs, which they've consistently refined and innovated for optimum effectiveness and user experience. From my personal experience at Rec, I can attest to the careful consideration and craftsmanship that goes into every single piece. My Imagine Strength workout was absolutely brutal, in a good way, of course. Now, what makes Imagine Strength truly stand out? They have innovative equipment tailored for the unique needs of HIIT studios, affordable and efficient designs, lowering the barriers to entry for a HIIT business, continuous innovation and refinement ensuring your studio stays ahead of the curve. Founder Jeff Turner and his team are dedicated to moving the HIIT industry forward and making strength training accessible to more people than ever before. Here's how you get started. Number 1, visit imaginestrength.com. Number 2, discuss your specific needs with the team. And number 3, select the equipment that will propel your business to the next level. Head to imaginestrength.com today and give your HIIT business the Imagine Strength edge. Be part of the HIIT revolution and see firsthand how their unique equipment can transform your studio's workout experience. Elevate your HIIT business with Imagine Strength. Let's go.